Greetings, welcome back to Black Bear News, where we are discussing climate change, abrupt climate change, things adjacent. Many things to cover as usual. Just want to let you all know that I am sending out the stickers tomorrow. I'm sorry for the delay. I was waiting for a couple other things to happen, and so it just got pushed back. But I'm putting them in the mail tomorrow, so however long it takes to get to you, there are quite a few international mailings, so I'm not sure how long the time will be for it to get to you, but expect the stickers soonly. Just jumping into, well, it seemed to be a little quiet at the end of last year as far as the extreme weather events. We hit a little bit of a lull and everything seemed to be calm, and then as soon as the new year hit, wham. This is from Chile. Extreme rainfall has led to deadly floods in northern Chile. Heavy rains have wreaked havoc on northern Chile, causing rivers to overflow and forcing residents from their flooded homes. Extreme rainfall in the Andes claimed several lives and destroyed homes and roads. In the Atacama Desert, normally one of the driest places on Earth, a 196-foot waterfall that had run dry for 10 years has been reactivated. As the rains start to die down, families are taking stock of the damage to homes. So this is basically a video. I'm going to link that below so y'all can check it out. More from the Southern Hemisphere. This is from USA Today, and this is from a few days ago. Record-shattering, unprecedented heat scorches Australia, Chile, and Argentina. While we've been shivering up here, folks in the Southern Hemisphere have been baking in all-time record summertime heat. Records have been set recently in Australia, Chile, Argentina, sparking wildfires and exacerbating droughts. In Australia, the heat was so intense it caused bats to fall from trees and snakes to seek refuge in people's toilets. Watch out for that one. According to the Australian Broadcasting Corporation and the Capital Weather Gang, overall it is the hottest January in Australia ever recorded. The Australian Bureau of Meteorology reported the heat waves there were unprecedented in their scale and duration, the Bureau said. One remarkable record was set in Port Augusta, Australia, which soared to 121 degrees. That's the hottest temperature ever recorded at a coastal location in the Southern Hemisphere, according to the Weather Underground meteorologist Bob Henson. The hottest temperature ever recorded at a coastal location in the Southern Hemisphere. Late in the month, folks in Wannerang, I think I'm pronouncing that totally wrong, endured Australia's all-time hottest night, when the overnight temperature only dropped to a sweltering 97.9 degrees. Let's just call that 98 degrees. The merciless heat has intensified droughts in several parts of Australia, the Bureau said. Across the Pacific, at the far southern tip in South America, the tiny town of Porvenir, Chile, soared to 90 degrees earlier this week. That's actually 90.5. This may have been the Earth's most southerly 90-degree temperature on record. Heat this high on the southern tip of South America is unprecedented. That would be like 90 degrees in the Arctic Circle, which has happened, by the way. The heat in Chile sparked a number of wildfires this week. The fires have killed 2 people and burned thousands of acres. Man, so Chile has wildfires, droughts, and heat waves. Elsewhere in South America, temperatures topped 100 degrees in Perito Moreno in Argentina, or Perito Moreno, an all-time record high, Capital Weather Gang said. And despite the recent polar vortex invasion up here in the U.S., the global temperature in 2018 was the 4th hottest on record, scientists announced earlier this week. Overall, the past 5 years have been the 5 warmest years since records began in the late 1800s, both NOAA and NASA said. Heat will continue to be the Earth's major weather story in the future as the globe warms due to human activity. Heat waves and other extreme weather are likely to persist as a consequence of accelerating climate change, a report from the World Meteorological Organization said last year. And it keeps on going. Here's some news out of Russia. This is from yesterday. Russia islands emergency over polar bear invasion. A remote Russian region has declared a state of emergency over the appearance of dozens of polar bears in its human settlements, local officials say. Authorities in the Novaya Zemlya Islands have home to a few thousand people said there were cases of bears attacking people and entering residential and public buildings. Wow, polar bears are affected by climate change and are increasingly forced on to land to look for food. Russia classes them as endangered. Hunting the bears is banned, and the Federal Environment Agency has refused to issue licenses to shoot them. Good for you guys. The bears had lost their fear of police patrols and signals used to warn them off, meaning that more drastic measures were needed, officials said. They say that if other means to scare off the bears fail, a cull could be the only answer. Why is it the only answer? How about the people move? Why do you have to kill the bears? Why do the bears have to go? You know, they're losing their habitat. They're endangered. But you're just going to kill them because they threaten people. How about you move the people? Just move your asses. Just leave. Go. You don't need to be there. Of course, I'm sure you need to be there because of, you know, something economic is going on there, I'm sure. But why not give the bears the space? Let them have some space. I'm sure they're looking for food. I don't know. There's got to be other ways to solve this problem rather than killing them, which seems incredibly hysterically insane. Because they're endangered, but we might have to kill them. The archipelago's main settlement, Belushia Guba, has reported a total of 52 bears in its vicinity, with between 6 and 10 constantly on its territory. Local administration head Vagansha Musin said more than 5 bears were on the territory of the local military garrison where air and air defense forces are based. I've been on Novaya Zemlya since 1983, he said. In an official press release, there's never been such a mass invasion of polar bears. His deputy said normal life was being disrupted by the threat. Well, there's a military base there, so, you know, gosh, we got to keep that going. Because the military is more important than, you know, animal life, habitat, anything else. And the military will be more important than the future of life on Earth. Right now, that's where it's ranked, is military. Future of all life on Earth, military. Future of all life on Earth, military. Insane, crazy human beings. Insane, crazy human beings. People are scared, afraid to leave their homes. Their daily routines are being broken. Oh, and parents are unwilling to let their children go to school or kindergarten. Well, yeah, don't do that. With Arctic sea ice diminishing as a result of climate change, polar bears are forced to change their hunting habits and spend more time on land looking for food. So human beings, why don't you use all that money that you have and go away, go somewhere else. You don't need to be there. In 2016, 5 Russian scientists were besieged by polar bears for several weeks at a remote weather station on the island of Troynoy, east of Novaya Zemlya. Poor scientists besieged by polar bears. Oh, why don't you guys leave? Leave that place. Moving on. Anyways, this article angers me to no end. Here's something that should anger you to no end from the Miami Herald. This is from February 4th. Health alert, don't swim or fish where 720,000 gallons of sewage were dumped into waters. A pump station malfunction led to a massive release of wastewater, prompting the Miami-Dade Water and Sewage Department to announce a precautionary advisory against recreational water usage for part of the northeast of Miami-Dade. The advisory recommends no swimming, fishing, or boating in the area bounded by Northeast 163rd Street to the north, the Intracoastal Waterway to the east, Haulover Inlet, including Haulover Beach to the south, and mainland Miami-Dade to the west. Also, the advisory covers beaches in Bal Harbor, south of Haulover, and Oleta River State Park. The 720,000 gallons of wastewater were released into a storm drain that led to waterways after what the county agency said was a mechanical failure at pump station 350 Sunny Isles Boulevard. Before the advisory is lifted, the water will have to be clean enough for 2 consecutive days as tested by the Florida Department of Health in Miami-Dade and the Department of Regulatory and Economic Resources. Yay. Oops. Sorry, guys. Here's some more waste in the ocean. Moving on. To more depressing news. So this article is from National Geographic. I have no idea how long it is. It's probably incredibly long because of National Geographic, but I'm going to get into it for a little bit and see how long we can make it into this information. The title of this article is "We Made Plastic. We Depend on It. Now We're Drowning in It." If plastic had been invented when the Pilgrims sailed for Plymouth, England, to North America, and the Mayflower had been stocked with bottled water and plastic wrapped snacks, their plastic trash would likely still be around 4 centuries later. If the Pilgrims had been like many people today and simply tossed their empty bottles and wrappers over the side, Atlantic waves and sunlight would have worn all that plastic into tiny bits, and those bits might still be floating around the world's oceans today, sponging up toxins to add to the ones already in them, waiting to be eaten by some hapless fish or oyster, and ultimately perhaps by one of us. We should give thanks that the Pilgrims didn't have plastic. I thought recently as I rode a train to Plymouth along England's south coast, I was on my way to see a man who would help me make sense of the whole mess we'd made with plastic, especially in the ocean. And there's just insanely disgusting pictures here of mountains and mountains of plastic. One in India, Mumbai, and one in Bangladesh. Because plastic wasn't invented until the late 19th century and production really only took off around 1950, we have a mere 9.2 billion tons of the stuff to deal with. Of that, more than 6.9 billion tons have become waste. And of that waste, a staggering 6.3 billion tons never made it to the recycling bin, a figure that stunned the scientists who crunched the numbers in 2017. Interestingly, I was just thinking today, there's some plastic that you can't recycle. But when I throw plastic into the garbage, I have to pause. I have to stop and, I don't know what, say a prayer for the earth or a blessing or like, I'm sorry, here's some plastic I'm putting into the garbage bin, because I don't know what else to do with it. But it is supremely difficult for me to throw plastic into the trash can because I know what it's doing and where it's going. No one knows how much unrecycled plastic waste ends up in the ocean or Earth's last sink. In 2015, Jenna Jambeck, a University of Georgia engineering professor, caught everyone's attention with a rough estimate. Between 5.3 million and 14 million tons each year just from coastal regions. Most of it isn't thrown off ships, she and her colleagues say, but it is dumped carelessly on land or in rivers, mostly in Asia. It's then blown or washed into the sea. Imagine 5 plastic grocery bags filled with plastic trash, Jambeck says, sitting on every foot of coastline around the world. That would correspond to about 8.8 million tons, her middle-of-the-road estimate of what the ocean gets from us annually. It's unclear how long it will take for that plastic to completely biodegrade into its constituent molecules. Estimates range from 450 years to never. Never. Meanwhile, ocean plastic is estimated to kill millions of marine animals every year. Nearly 700 species, including endangered ones, are known to have been affected by it. Some are harmed visibly, strangled by abandoned fishing nets or discarded six-pack rings. Many more are probably harmed invisibly. Marine species of all sizes, from zooplankton to whales, now eat microplastics, the bits smaller than 1/5 of an inch across. On Hawaii's Big Island, on a beach that seemingly should have been pristine, no paved roads lead to it, I walked ankle deep through microplastics. They crunched like Rice Krispies under my feet. After that, I could understand why some people see ocean plastic as a looming catastrophe, worth mentioning in the same breath as climate change. At a global summit in Nairobi last December, the head of the United Nations Environment Program spoke of an ocean Armageddon. And yet, there's a key difference. Ocean plastic is not as complicated as climate change. There are no ocean trash deniers, at least so far. To do something about it, we don't have to remake our planet's entire energy system. This isn't a problem where we don't know what the solution is, says Ted Siegler, a Vermont resource economist who has spent more than 25 years working with developing nations on garbage. We know how to pick up garbage. Anyone can do it. We know how to dispose of it. We know how to recycle. It's a matter of building the necessary institutions and systems, he says, ideally before the ocean turns irretrievably and for centuries to come into a thin soup of plastic. In Plymouth, under the gray gloom of an English autumn, Richard Thompson waits in a yellow slicker outside Plymouth University's Coxside Marine Station at the edge of the harbor. A lean man of 54 with a smooth pate rimmed with gray hair. Thompson was headed for an ordinary career as a marine ecologist in 1993. He was working on a PhD on limpets and microalgae that grow on coastal rocks when he participated in his first beach cleanup on the Isle of Man. While other volunteers zoomed in on the plastic bottles and bags and nets, Thompson focused on the small stuff, the tiny particles that lay underfoot, ignored at the high tide line. At first, he wasn't even sure they were plastic. He had to consult forensic chemists to confirm it. There was a real mystery to be solved back then, at least. Sorry, I lost my place. There was a real mystery to be solved back then, at least in academic circles. Scientists wondered why they weren't finding even more plastic in the sea. World production had increased exponentially from 2.3 million tons in 1950. It grew to 162 million in 1993 and 448 million by 2015. Whoa. So, yeah, trying to work out percentages really quick in my head, but that's a lot. From 2 million tons to 448 million tons by 2015. The amount of plastic drifting on the ocean and washing up on beaches, alarming as that was, didn't seem to be rising as fast. That begs the question, where is it? Thompson said, we can't establish harm to the environment unless we know where it is. In the years since the first beach cleanup, Thompson has helped provide the beginnings of the answer. The missing plastic is getting broken into pieces so small they're hard to see. In 2004 paper, Thompson coined the term microplastics for these small bits, predicting accurately, as it turned out, that they had potential for large-scale accumulation in the ocean. Don't know if I'm going to read this whole thing because it is long. It is long. I'm going to read a little more, and then I'm probably going to move on. When we met in Plymouth last fall, Thompson and two of his students had just completed a study that indicated it's not just waves and sunlight that break down plastic. In lab tests, they'd watched amphipods of the species Orchestia gamaralis, tiny shrimp-like crustaceans that are common in European coastal waters, devour pieces of plastic bags and determined they could shred a single bag into 1.75 million microscopic fragments. The little creatures chewed through plastic especially fast, Thompson's team found, when it was coated with microbial slime that is their normal food. They spat out or eventually excreted the plastic bits. Microplastics have been found everywhere in the ocean that people have looked, from sediments on the deepest seafloor to ice floating in the Arctic, which, as it melts over the next decade, could release more than 1 trillion bits of plastic into the water, according to one estimate. Oh my God. On some beaches on the big island of Hawaii, as much as 15% of the sand is actually grains of microplastic. Camilo Point Beach, the one I walked on, catches plastic from the North Pacific Gyre, the trashiest of 5 swirling current systems that transport garbage around the ocean basins and concentrate it in great patches. At Camilo Point, the beach is piled with laundry baskets, bottles, and containers with labels in Chinese, Japanese, Korean, English, and occasionally Russian. On Henderson Island, an uninhabited coral island in the South Pacific, researchers have found an astonishing volume of plastic from South America, Asia, New Zealand, Russia, and as far away as Scotland. I'm going to link this below for y'all to read if you want to read the rest of it. But you know what the problem is. You understand that it's dire. Is a huge problem, but we don't see, other than straws and eating utensils and maybe to-go boxes, you don't see people talking about a worldwide ban on plastic. I would love to see that be a part of the Green New Deal. Whatever gets hammered out, I would love them to pay attention to the plastic crisis in there somewhere in the language, like ban all plastics, or we can't keep doing this to the environment. Because it's not just plastic bottles. It's, cars are made out of plastic. Everything is made out of plastic. Everything is packaged in plastic. Trash bags themselves, plastic. Garbage cans, everything. I mean, if you just stop and look at everything that's made of plastic, head exploding time. I'm going to read this last article. Hopefully I have time to read the whole thing. This is from February 5th by Elizabeth West from dissidentvoice.org. Living like it matters. Silver linings in the very dark cloud of climate catastrophe. We actually do not have all the time in the world, so I'm going to be bold. What you do after you finish reading this is your business, and ultimately that is exactly as it should be. We may all be facets of a larger oneness, tiny sparks of the divine dwelling in human form, but for the moment, allowing the potential truth of a larger connection. We are very clearly individuals, each with our own experience and outlook. We have our own ways of coping, and to some extent, each of us charts a unique course through this life. We are often granted some choice about how we live and how we die, though most of us vastly prefer to focus on the former. Even there, we tend to let life happen, getting pulled from one urgency to another amusement without full consciousness of how we spend the time. Where did the time go? Is a plaintive query often expressed. Time flies when you're having fun, when you are busy, when you aren't fully present. Life happens to us more often. Time flies when you're fully present too. Life happens to us more often than most of us would like to admit, but still, we can always meet it, our life, where we find it today, and choose differently how we experience the flow of time, how we interact with the circumstances we have been given and crafted for ourselves. Such is the beauty of being alive. As for dying, it is arguably the biggest taboo in first world cultures. Whereas nearly every shamanic tradition teaches students the imperative of carrying death close by at all times, we're not so comfortable dealing with it in the West, and thus we lose out on a lot of life. Without death whispering in our ear, reminding us that our time is finite, it is easy to just let life happen. And then time flies and we don't know where it went. Going one further, the entire culture, Western culture, is built on not just avoiding death, but escaping death for a few more moments or years. That it is built in, programmed into us to avoid, escape, and deny and defy death at every turn. Never has it been more urgent to consider how we live and how we die. We have, as individuals and a species, made serial choices about how we live, many of us unconscious and often without all the facts. But the sorrowful reality is that in a world of cause and effect, those choices have led us right up to where we are today. At least waist deep in the 6th mass extinction, we stand right at the edge of the end of much that we have known and taken for granted. It is my sense that most of us understand this in our bones, in our old reptilian brains, and what remains of our intuitive connection to the rest of life here on Earth. And we are, in large numbers, beginning to pay intellectual homage or homage to the facts. They are overwhelmingly and increasingly hard to ignore. So, on the one hand, there are more and more people acknowledging that we are pretty thoroughly screwed, that time has run out, and there is no change we can make big enough to avert disaster. On the other, while there is clearly a lot of fear and grief out in the world, plenty of panic, and the kinds of behaviors that arise in reaction to dire threat, these expressions tend not to be connected consciously to climate catastrophe, projected onto anything but the mess we've made and don't have the will to fix. But we get pretty excited about protecting ourselves from taxes, Mexicans, Venezuelans, Cuban crickets, Palestinian children with rocks, vaccinations, as well as people who don't vaccinate their kids, and of course, Donald Trump and his gang of feckless thugs. The list goes on. Add your favorites. Anything but the big kahuna, the final finale. Anything we think we might actually be able to solve, change, neutralize. Our frailty is exposed here, and by avoiding consciousness of the imminence of catastrophe, we miss out on the chance to live as fully as we can while we can. No one knows for sure how long we have. No one ever does, but we try to make reasonable assumptions and operate from there. Estimates for the timing of civilization's demise now range from a pessimistic year or two to an optimistic 80 or so, though nearly every day a new and often shocking study announces that planetary degradation is happening much faster than previously predicted. From what I can glean, 10 years might be a fair guess. Not so long. And for some, the wild and so-called natural disasters have already come calling. Maria in Puerto Rico, Paradise, and the polar vortex have all claimed plenty of lives, thrown countless others into chaos. If I am wrong and the Arctic starts to freeze over again, the rain fills shrunken aquifers in the Central Valley of California, the oceans recede a few feet, and vulnerable islands are reclaimed, well, then I am in error and will gladly suffer the ridicule. But if I and many others better qualified to make the assessment are not wrong, we don't have that much time left to consider how do I want to live, and possibly more helpful, how do I want to die? Last week, I attended an informal gathering at a friend's house in Berkeley, just ahead of a KPFA-sponsored talk on climate change by Dar Jamel and Antonio Juhaz, entitled, Is Our Earth in Hospice Mode? Joined only by our understanding of where the Earth is heading, everyone there was post-acceptance, far along the path of their own personal climate collapse journey. It bears noting that although some of these people would probably describe themselves as doomers, I haven't been in a room with as much joy, gratitude, and laughter in a long time. Doomers. When doomers go mainstream. After sharing a potluck meal, we sat in a circle and talked about living and dying. Not surprisingly, each of us had thought about how we wanted to engage with the time remaining, the time, however long or short, between now and then. As we took turns talking, it emerged that some of us are focused on cultivating gratitude and looking for joys in the gifts of each day, each breath, each connection. Others are prioritizing ways of being in service or finding the right means to stand in solidarity with the earth. Checking items off a bucket list came up a number of times. A few of us spoke of having work and family obligations that keep us simply putting one foot in front of the other, caught between the old paradigm and gnawing awareness that it is not sustainable. Predictably, being with loved ones and in nature were critical to many in the room. Then we turned our impending deaths to our considerations of the manner and timing of our departure from this life. It was a conversation far outside the bounds of normalcy, a discussion that could only happen in such extraordinary times. Listening to 15 relative strangers lay bare how they imagine they will face their final days or hours was a profound experience. The range of responses was broad, from a plan to hole up with a rifle to protect the last food and water, to a desire to choose a moment and check out intentionally before personal control had been completely forfeited. Some of us admitted to stashing Nembutal, while others have caches of rice and dried beans and bottled water. One young person spoke of his kit, which includes plenty of candy bars and tequila, along with solar charger, so he can spend his last days able to look at photos of family, friends, and happier times. Pure comfort. Another man who acknowledged that he had not been able to delve into this question before found himself in tears. He remembered the transcendent beauty of the time he spent years ago with a woman he loved, helping her to live while she died, laughing and crying together, enlivened and awake during her last months. He knew then that this was what he wanted to do with his grandchildren all the way up until the last breath. Despite what might seem to be a macabre topic, there was no despair in the room. In fact, I think it's safe to say that we all experienced some lightening, some lifting of mental weights, some new space cleared for joy. The opportunity to be totally honest with other human beings about something so important, so deeply personal, and yet so widely silenced by our society was both freeing and energizing. Overall, none of us want to die, but we are facing head on the likelihood that we will before our time, as it were. A friend and I had already been conducting an exploration of our own death desires over the past few months, meeting every couple of weeks to map out possible scenarios and trying to understand how we would ideally respond to each one. In the end, the plans are loose and full of holes, too many variables to account for, but the process has been illuminating, allowing each of us to become clearer about our values and the things we want to remember when crisis arrives. Just for illustration, I honed in on my truth that if given the option, I wanted to go out sharing with others, vulnerable and possibly a lot sooner, rather than sequestered and parsing out sardines and peanuts in order to eke out a few more days or weeks for myself and my family. Since I have no idea what adventures lie ahead, I may or may not end up being able to act upon this, but I feel immensely more at ease, having gone to the mat with my survival instincts to see just how powerful they are. My friend's truths are very different to mine in content, but he was too able to identify some of who he really wants to be in a time of crisis, as well as the challenges he faces in doing so. Knowledge in this case may not be power per se, but it is unquestionably empowering. Because I and most of us live within the duality of current reality, largely unchanged, and the foreknowledge at some level of massive tumult, this exercise often felt a bit surreal. My life proceeds much as it has, yet death is now firmly ensconced on my left shoulder, and for that I am grateful. It speaks to me. Don't miss a moment. Choose the life you really want while you have the chance. Don't waste time on things that don't really matter. Having a framework for how I want to approach my death frees me up to live more authentically and with greater integrity and intention, so long as I am granted to live. I am paradoxically more here, since I have let myself contemplate the time when it will no longer be so. Each of us must navigate the uncertainty and upheavals ahead in our own way, following our personal compass. But for anyone who has reached a point of acceptance and their days are numbered, whether it be as a result of climate collapse, political chaos, and war, or just the relentless advance of years, two big questions inevitably arise. How shall I live what is left? And how do I want to die when the time comes? My experience, which echoes wisdom handed down through the most mystical traditions, suggests that attending to the latter first provides essential guidance for understanding the former. My life, whatever remains of it, is inestimably richer for having taken the time to investigate how I want it to end. I find that I'm living bigger and bolder, not holding back, not waiting for some mythical time in the future when perhaps it will be easier to do so. I want to live as I want to die, sharing with others despite the risks. In all honesty, I feel some trepidation writing this piece, speaking openly about death designing to an anonymous audience. I am fairly sure that it will disturb more than a few who read it. And yet the old fears that would have stayed my hand in the past now seem less needful than the impulse to connect honestly as time grows shorter. Clearly, there could be no one right way to live in these times. The waters are uncharted. We will do what works for us. Denial, grief, gratitude, hope, anger, depression, action. Who is it to say which of these each of us must traverse, for how long and in what order? But I share a fragment of my journey simply as an invitation. If it feels right to you, consider diving deeply into the truth of our collective and individual realities, facing your mortality and that of those you love. Death offers wise and consoling advice if you have the courage to listen. And that courage is quite likely to be rewarded with a life more precious, richer, and ironically, that much harder to bid farewell. Is it worth it? I can't answer for anyone other than myself, but we can probably agree that this situation seriously sucks. Given what it is and what almost certainly lies ahead, I find myself heartened and even hopeful, not about the quantity of my life, but about the quality of it. I feel very fortunate to have found this small silver lining, the goad I needed to finally be here now. Excellent article by Elizabeth West, and funny that she mentions the word doomers. I I reluctantly acknowledge that this channel is probably geared for doomers. Obviously, we are in the doomosphere, as has been dubbed by a few or maybe many. And it's reflected in the fact that there are so few yet hardcore views, few yet hardcore subscribers. And if you're really dealing with the absolute, very difficult reality of the path that we are on as a species and as a planet, that is information that people really want to avoid and really don't want to think about or don't want to live in, right? Maybe you acknowledge it, maybe, but you don't want to live in it. You don't want to be, it's hard for even people who watch this channel to acknowledge it daily. Obviously, it's depressing. I guess that's why I spend a little bit of time on this channel talking about a possible path forward, because, and that possible path forward, includes things that we might or might not be able to do. Also, possibly ways in which we could live with whatever time we have left. You can call that whatever you like. I don't really care. I just call it, a way to live, or how to live, or what do we do with the rest of our time. There's really nothing wrong with thinking about ideas or talking about possibilities. And we can go on and on and on and around and around and around about like what is right, what is wrong, what is possible, what's not possible. That's what this channel is here for, is that discussion. And I appreciate all of you being here to help me and to kind of be a roundtable for that discussion. Obviously, that discussion is going to grow much larger and much wider. The audience is going to be much wider in the coming days. We already have this topic becoming mainstream news, and I've even heard a few alternative and regular news outlets, some people on YouTube and even some on the mainstream saying like, we don't have time to actually mitigate the consequences of what we've already done, but we possibly might have time to mitigate it getting, to catastrophe extinction levels. Again, another debate, but at least they're acknowledging the fact that we have already damaged ourselves. We've damaged ourselves enough that things will not be normal in the near future. We've damaged ourselves to the point where we're probably not going to fix the damage already done, but we possibly could stave off something much worse. Who knows? Who knows, my friends? Thank you so much for your eyes, your ears, and your conscience. If you would like to support this channel, you can do so at the links below. I'm thinking about doing a live stream tomorrow night, maybe 5 or 6 Pacific Standard Time, which would be about 8 or 9 Eastern. I like to do these every once in a while because it's kind of fun to interact with everybody. It's also a little bit of a small fundraiser for me. It's a way for people to donate via the super chat, which is very, very helpful to keeping this channel going and just helping me have a little more time in order to do this. So I think I'm going to do that tomorrow. Let's say 5 o'clock Pacific Standard Time. We will do a live cast Black Bear News. Please be here. And I will see you then. Until next time, peace.